Hey there, forget the fairy tales you were ever told. The truth is darker than that, and strangely, it is also quieter. Tonight, we are not chasing a monster through a castle. We are walking through a Victorian city at tea time, where the air smells like roasted nuts and burnt sugar and something vaguely buttery. And before you get too comfortable, let me place 3 little shadows in your hand, like smooth stones you can roll between your fingers. A bright pink sweet that gets its color from a poison you cannot taste. A kind that settles into the body slowly, the way fog settles into brick. A loaf of bread so white it looks like snow, whitened with a powder borrowed from workshops, not kitchens, leaving stomachs tired and dry over the years. A cup of milk that looks innocent, thinned with water, brightened with chalk, then coaxed back into looking rich by tricks that do not belong near a child's mouth. If you find peace in this particular darkness, leave a like. And if you want more nights like this, subscribe. Only if your heart says yes. Now, lower your lights. Let the room become smaller. Let your shoulders soften. If you can, loosen your jaw, as if you have just finished a long day, and no one is asking anything of you anymore. Breathe in and breathe out, slow. We begin on the cobblestone edge of a street market, early evening, the sun already slipping away as if it is tired of looking at what happens here. Oil lamps are being lit one by one, shop by shop. Each flame flutters as it catches, a tiny nervous thing behind glass. Coal smoke curls lazily through the alleys, not rushing, not caring, and it mixes with the scent of pastry so warm it seems to cling to your coat like velvet. Listen closely and you can hear the market breathe, boots scuffing stone, coins ringing, a dog barking once, then deciding it is not worth the effort, vendors calling out like stage actors, louder than they need to be, because loudness is a kind of protection in a crowded city. On one corner, a man waves paper cones of sugared almonds. On another, a woman sells strips of candied orange peel, glittering under gaslight like little stained glass windows you can eat. Something sizzles in a pan nearby and the smell is oddly delicious, the sort of smell that makes the body lean forward before the mind has finished thinking. You drift the way a curious person drifts when they do not have a schedule, when they are allowed to be slow, and you find yourself near a stall where children cluster like moths around a lamp. Their faces are smudged with the city, soot in the crease of a nose, a shiny patch on a cheek where a sleeve wiped sweat and left a streak. Their eyes, though, their eyes are bright. They are fixed on trays of sweets stacked in neat rows, bright pink and lemon yellow cubes, some wrapped in wax paper, some laid out in the open like gems offered to the air. The vendor watches the children with a practiced softness, not kindness exactly, more like familiarity. He knows their hunger. He knows their small coins. He knows the way they want something that feels like joy, even when their pockets hold almost nothing. He calls them conversation lozenges, though right now the only conversation is a silent agreement between a halfpenny and a handful of colour. You lean in, just a little. The surface of the cubes is matte, not glossy, like chalk that learned how to pretend. The vendor takes a small chisel and snaps a piece off a larger block. The sound is sharp, clean, almost satisfying. He places the piece in twisted paper with delicate fingers, as if he is handing you something precious. It is heavy, heavier than you expect. You lift it to your tongue. Sweet, almost too sweet, the kind of sweetness that tries to cover up everything else. Then, as it dissolves, a powdery aftertaste clings to your teeth, a dry, dusty feeling, as if you licked the inside of a painted wall. And here is the trick. In many of these sweets, there is hardly any real sugar. Real sugar costs. It comes from far away. It arrives through ports, through hands, through empire, through violence that does not need to announce itself in a candy store. So the sweetness is stretched, padded, made convincing. That chalky mouthfeel, it can come from finely ground plaster of Paris, calcium sulfate, a powder that belongs to moles and walls. Not dramatic, not instantly fatal, just wrong. Wrong in the slow way. And the pink, that cheerful, innocent pink, sometimes it comes from cochineal, crushed insects, which is at least a kind of honest nature. Sometimes it comes from red lead, bright and stubborn, the kind of pigment that holds its color beautifully in a shop window and then holds onto a body for a long time after. You cannot see any of this. Not really. Not if you grew up here. Not if your tongue learned early that food is not always what it claims. Not if your stomach learned to accept discomfort as ordinary, like coal smoke, like damp socks, like the ache in your back after standing all day. That is what makes it dark. Not the poison itself, the normality. A little girl beside you tugs her brother's sleeve and holds up a marshmallow twist the size of her hand. He grins, missing a tooth, and bites into a sugar wafer with a small snap. They laugh. Their fingers are sticky. Their joy is real. And you feel something tender inside you, something you might not want to feel. Because it is hard to condemn a sweet when it is the closest thing a child has to a celebration. An elderly man stands by a toffee booth, chewing slowly, eyes half-lidded like someone savoring a memory more than a flavor. He mutters that the old sweets were better. You used to know your mint from your lemon, he says. Now everything tastes like perfume and cold dust. He eats it anyway. You watch him, and you realize the market did not evolve out of pure deceit. It evolved out of demand. People wanted sweet comfort after work. People wanted it cheap. And so clever hands found a way. Junk food is not a term anyone says yet. Not in this century, not out loud. But its spirit is here, alive in paper cones and wax wrapping. You drift deeper into the market, into a narrow row between two larger shops, where the crowd thins and the noise softens. The stalls here feel quieter, less theatrical. There are more knowing glances, more shrugging smiles. A booth displays striped paper bags hanging from hooks. Fruit drops, the sign says. The vendor offers no description, just a scoop and a grin. Inside, the bags are perfectly round, brightly colored globes that shimmer like stained glass. They look like hard candy, but smoother, a little too perfect. Apple green, raspberry red, lemon yellow, that borders on neon. He tells you they will soothe the throat, help with a dry tickle, taste just like fruit. And you could believe him if you wanted. It would be easy to believe him. Belief is sometimes the cheapest thing we buy. But you know the secret now. These drops are rarely made with fruit. More often it is flavoring oil mixed into boiled sugar, or something that resembles sugar. To keep them from sticking in damp air, they can be dusted with powdered minerals. Again, not always deadly, just not food. Apple green can come from verdigris, a copper salt that looks gorgeous under gaslight. Raspberry red might be cochineal, if you are lucky, or lead chromate if you are not. The vendor does not look villainous. He looks tired. He shrugs when asked where the candies come from. Liverpool, maybe. Imported, maybe. Hard to say. They sell well when the fog is heavy, he adds. People like something bright when the air turns yellow. And there it is again. That quiet bargain between what people want and what the city offers. You pause by a crate that holds something like Turkish delight. The pieces are cut and dusted so heavily your fingertips come away white. The texture is soft but hollow, as if the sweet itself is pretending to be fuller than it is. You hear a woman advising her friend not to buy from the tall man with the striped apron. His barley twists are made from boiled rope and varnish, she whispers, half laughing. Her friend laughs too. and buys one anyway, a halfpenny, sweet enough. You know that feeling, don't you? When you hear a warning, you believe it, and you still choose not to carry it, not because you are foolish, because life is already heavy, and you do not want to add another fear to your basket. You stop at a basket of toffee pennies. They glisten with a sheen that looks like it belongs on polished boots. When you lift one, it sticks slightly to the wax paper and leaves behind a faint residue, more oil than caramel. You bite, and the flavor turns oddly metallic. A small cold note at the back of sweetness, like a needle hidden in velvet. You do not swallow. You let it sit on your tongue for a moment, and you notice how your mouth reacts. A slight tightening, a dryness. The body always knows before the mind admits. Then you fold the paper, and quietly you let the rest go. No one notices. Everyone is busy. Everyone is busy living. The city darkens. Lamps flicker in shop windows. Behind you, the calls of sweet sellers continue, soft and persistent, almost musical, like a lullaby that does not care what it contains. You leave the market with sticky fingers and a mouth tingling from something vaguely fruity. And on the walk home, the cobblestones seem louder, as if they are repeating the story back to you with every step. The next morning, you wake still thinking about that pink candy cube, the way it crumbled just a little too easily, the way the chalky aftertaste lingered more in memory than on the tongue. Curiosity takes the lead. The morning air smells sharper now, less caramel and spice, more coal and wet stone. You duck into a side alley off the main street, where smaller vendors set up under canvas. Sheets, the fabric, dark with soot and yesterday's rain. There is a stall you missed. Its sign simply says, sweets and savories, painted in curly red letters. On the counter are familiar things, fudge squares, striped barley sticks, what looks like a cherry tart under a glass dome. But it is what sits behind the stall that catches your eye. A shelf lined with jars, not candies, not treats, powders, pigments. Corked bottles that belong in a paint shop more than a bakery. You squint at labels. Prussian blue, red oxide, alum, pearl white. Color means everything here. A white loaf is seen as cleaner, classier, more modern. A bright green sweet looks refreshing. A deep red drop signals richness. So the makers do what they can to meet the expectations of the eye. Some use cochineal, honest in its own strange way. Others reach for cheaper man-made brightness. Red lead, chrome yellow, copper greens, not always malicious, often habitual. The hands that scoop these powders do not see themselves as poisoners. They see themselves as enhancers, helpers, people who know what sells. You touch the corner of a wrapped toffee and your fingers come away with faint dust, harmless, maybe, or maybe just the first layer of a larger story. You find a jar marked artificial almond. You lift it to your nose. It smells sharp, clean, too perfect. Like an idea of almonds rather than almonds themselves. I always feel a little strange at moments like this, because it is almost beautiful how the city invents flavors out of chemistry. Beautiful and sad, like a song sung by someone who has forgotten the original melody. Outside, the cheerful colors still twinkle from windows, but now they feel like costumes. Disguise is meant to reassure the eye, not nourish the body. You walk past marzipan fruits, miniature masterpieces, shaped like pears and cherries. The almond base has likely been swapped for breadcrumbs or beans and artificial essence. A small compromise, the sort that seems harmless until it becomes a habit. And it is not just sweets. Vinegar might be sharpened with acid, mustard cut with flour or bone powder, tea darkened with dye. The trick is always appearance. Victorians live in a visual world. a world of shopfront performance, of sharp contrasts, of elegant windows hiding modest realities. Food follows suit, dazzle first, digest later. You drift toward a bakery, drawn by warmth. The window is fogged slightly from the heat inside. Loaves are stacked in pyramids behind glass, golden crusts, soft centers. It smells like comfort. It smells like something you want to trust. You step in. A bell jingles. The air is sweet with yeast and faint sugar. A baker slices a loaf for a customer. The inside is dazzlingly white, almost unnaturally so. Not just pale, but bright, as if the bread is trying to glow. You lift a small roll from the sample tray. It is light, too light. You squeeze gently and it springs back like sponge. When you tear a piece, it crumbles between your fingers before you can even taste it. Dust falling like snow onto your coat. Snow in a cold city. You bite. It tastes fine. A little bland, dry, easy to swallow. And that is the point. People want bread that does not ask them to chew much. People are tired. Their mouths are tired. Their lives are tired. You glance down and notice, near the back, a small tin without a label. Smudged fingerprints on the lid. The baker pinches a small amount of pale powder and works it into the mix with the same casual motion he uses for salt. Alum, a compound used in tanning. Leather, used here to whiten flour, stiffen poor dough, make rough grained look refined. It is not illegal. Not yet. Food laws are vague. Inspections are rare. If it does not make someone collapse in the street, it passes. You watch a young clerk beside you buy 3 rolls and ask for them to be split and drizzled with treacle. Lunch, he explains, laughing as if that is normal. And it is normal. For him. For thousands. You step back onto the cobblestones. Shoppers carry loaves under their arms. A mother tears a roll in half and hands it to her daughter as they walk. No one talks about additives. They talk about price, softness, crust. The long-term cost is harder to see. Digestion grows sluggish. Stomachs ache more often. People blame damp air, stress, factory hours. They rarely blame the loaf, because how could something so pure-looking be at fault? You walk on, and you notice how the city keeps feeding itself with things that are almost real. Close enough, bright enough, cheap enough. And as the evening comes again, gaslight softening every edge, you feel the story settle into you like a warm weight, not with a scream, with a sigh. You return to your small room. The stairwell smells of old wood and wet wool. Each step creaks differently, like the house remembers every person who climbed it tired. Inside, the fire is low, only embers, breathing red. You sit. You let your hands rest in your lap. Your fingers still remember the sticky paper cones, the chalk dust, the strange metallic note at the back of sweetness. Close your eyes with me for a moment. You can still see the pink candy glowing behind your eyelids, the apple green drops shining like tiny promises. The blinding white bread, soft as illusion. Do not force yourself to answer anything. Just notice. Just listen. Let the questions float, light as ash. Because the darkest histories often enter people not through violence, but through routine, through what is eaten quickly, through what is swallowed without time to think. And that is why we tell it softly, so you can touch it without being hurt, so you can drift deeper into sleep. Breathe in, breathe out. The market fades behind you like music down a foggy street. The city hums, your body grows heavy, and somewhere in the warmth of your mouth, a sweet dissolves into dust, and the night keeps going. Morning comes with a different smell. Not caramel, not toasted sugar. Morning smells like damp stone and coal and the sharp, clean sting of cold air that wakes the lungs, before the mind is ready. You step outside, and the street is already awake in its own tired way. Carts rattling, hooves tapping. A thin drizzle that turns the cobbles dark and reflective, as if the city has been polished by rain. I want you to walk slowly, not because you are cautious, but because slow walking lets you hear everything. The little scrape of grit under your boot, the soft hiss of gas lamps being turned down, the distant clank of iron shutters lifting, one by one, like eyelids opening. You follow yesterday's curiosity like a thread in your pocket. It pulls you back toward the market, but your eyes have changed. You are not looking for treats now. You are looking for seams. In a side lane you find the stall with the jars again. The powders sit there like quiet confession. Pearl white, alum, red oxide. A jar of something. Blue that looks almost pretty enough to forgive. The vendor is busy with customers. No one asks about the shelf. No one wants to know where colour comes from. Colour is a promise, a quick promise. And quick promises sell. You step away and let the street carry you. Farther on, closer to the factories, the buildings grow taller. Brick walls loom like cliffs. Windows are high and narrow, dark with soot. Above them, chimneys breathe smoke in steady pulses, like a giant animal sleeping while still working. You press your palm briefly to a brick wall. It is cold. The cold sinks into your skin slowly, the way the city sinks into people. And for a moment you imagine the wall is holding every breath that has ever been exhaled here, every sigh, every cough, every tired laugh. Then the factory whistle blows. It is long, sharp, and it slices the morning air as if the air were cloth. Instantly, people pour out, men with caps pulled low, women with aprons tucked into coats, teenagers with faces too young for the way they move, even children, some of them, moving like small, quick shadows. They do not wander, they do not browse. They flow toward food like a tide that knows exactly where it must go. That is when you see it clearly. In their hands are not baskets of vegetables, not meat pies meant for a table, not anything that asks them to sit down. In their hands are parcels, paper cones of sweets, biscuits wrapped in waxed sheets, a strip of licorice, a penny bun. It is not snacking. For many of them it is lunch. A boy passes you, barely more than a teen, chewing a cube of honeycomb toffee as he walks. His clothes are soot-streaked. His hair is flattened by a cap. He does not stop. He does not look up. He eats with the same rhythm you might chew gum. You watch him and you feel something strange. Not horror, not even anger, more like a soft ache, because you understand why. A full meal does not fit into 10 minutes. A stew does not fit into a pocket. A roast does not fit into a wage that disappears before the week is over, but a fistful of sugar buttons that fits. It fits between labor and time. It fits the business of staying upright. You follow the crowd to a small corner shop tucked beneath a row of flats. The air inside smells of paper and flour and something faintly sweet. Shelves are lined with tins and parcels stacked neatly, as if order itself is being sold. The shopkeeper has a tidy moustache and hands that move with meticulous care. He nods at you, polite, not warm, not cold. You take your time, the way you can take time when you are not being chased by a whistle. You pick up a tin labeled meal tabs. It rattles like pills. When you shake it gently, the sound is small and dry. That sound does something to you. It makes your stomach tighten, just a little, because it suggests a new idea of food, not nourishment, not pleasure, a dose. You set it down and run a finger along the edge of another tin. Button biscuits, hard enough to survive. Weeks. Dry enough to forget they were ever alive. A jar of fruit. Confection sits above them. labels showing berries that are mostly fantasy. You glance at the sign near the till, a treat between work, and you think, yes, a treat, a pause, a tiny bright moment in a day of soot and machinery. You ask the shopkeeper, softly, how business is. He shrugs. Steady. They come for the same things each day, he says. Jam rolls, lemon drops. No time for flour sacks or whole loaves anymore. He taps a row of biscuit tins. They like the ones that crunch loudest, he adds, half amused, half tired. Says something, doesn't it? It does. It says people want sound, a crunch that proves something happened. A little violence in the mouth to remind the body it still exists. Outside again, you follow the scent of bread. Not the scent of pastry, but bread, warm yeast and browned crust. A bakery window glows. Loaves are stacked behind glass, golden and inviting. For a moment you feel the old comfort rise, that simple human trust in warm bread. Then you step inside. The bell jingles, thin and bright. The air is thick with warmth, and you see the bread, white. So white it seems to reject the city's grime. Loaves, lined up like soldiers, identical in size and shape, perfect, too perfect. A baker slices a loaf for a customer. The interior is dazzling, almost unnaturally clean. You watch the knife move. The slice falls open. The crumb looks like pale foam. You lift a small roll from a tray. It is light, not just light in weight, light in meaning, like it does not want to leave a trace. You squeeze it and it springs back. You tear a piece and it crumbles into fine dust that clings to your fingertips. You bring your fingers to your nose, no smell, just powder. Behind the counter, near the back, you notice a small tin, no label, smudged lid. It sits there like a secret everyone has stopped calling a secret. The baker opens it, pinches a pale powder, and folds it into the dough. He does it without drama, without hiding, as if he is adding salt, alum. A compound used in tanning leather, here used to make poor flour look rich, to stiffen dough, to brighten the loaf, to satisfy the eye. A customer beside you says cheerfully, "Give me the whitest ones." And the baker does. He is not cackling. He is not cruel. He is adapting. You want to ask. You want to ask the way you might ask about weather, gentle and neutral. What is that? Do you always use it? But you do not ask, because you can feel how thin the margins are here, how close everyone is to falling. And questions can be expensive. You step out the back into a narrow alley where sacks of flour lean against the wall. Some are labelled clearly, some are not. Tin canisters sit on a shelf, contents unknown to anyone without training. Fingerprints smear the lids like small admissions. The workbench is worn smooth from years of use. Dough is kneaded with mechanical precision. Fast, no time for boat. Fuss. This is bread of necessity. A delivery boy arrives, breath puffing in the cold, and collects baskets of rolls. You glance at the paper. Hospice order. Bread for a small institution down the lane. Charity bread, stretched a little thinner, perhaps. Still warm, still delivered. The baker sighs, almost proud. Better than wasting it, he mutters. You walk away with a heaviness in your chest that feels oddly like flour dust, settling purity or possibility. That is the quiet question under every loaf. And then you smell something else. Not the sharp, clean scent of whitened bread, a deeper smell, earth, grain, a faint sweetness that does not need perfume. You follow it as if you are following a candle through fog. It leads you to an older bakery. Soot on the windowsill, brick darkened by years. Inside, the light is soft, dimmed by age-stained glass. Wooden shelves curve around the walls. Loaves are darker, denser, wrapped in waxed paper, sitting heavy and calm. An older man stands behind the counter. He greets you with a nod, not rushed, not theatrical. His hands move slowly, like hands that still remember what bread is meant to be. You point to a roll and ask what is in it. He shrugs. Flour, salt, yeast, maybe a little milk if I've got it. He says it like a joke, but you believe him. Then he says something you will not forget. People don't want bread anymore. He pauses, looks at the shelves, looks past you, toward the street where the city is hurrying. They want bread that looks like cake. That sentence lands quietly, but it is heavy. It explains the whiteness, the softness, the way people choose what looks refined, even when their bodies are begging for something real. You buy a roll. When he hands it to you, you feel the weight in your palm. Real weight. You bite. It is chewy. It asks you to work. It fills you slowly, the way honest food fills you, like warmth spreading, rather than a spark that burns out. There is a faint sweetness from grain itself. No metallic edge, no chalky dryness, just bread. You chew and you can hear your own chewing, a sound almost rare in this century of rushed bites. And you realize something simple. Real food slows you down. It forces you to be present. The old baker watches you chew. He does not smile broadly. He just nods as if he has seen a small victory. Outside again, the contrast is brutal. A glossy bakery across the street has a queue curling out the door. Bright windows, clean uniforms, white loaves lined up like trophies. People want the performance. People want the look. You slip your roll into your coat pocket, warm against your ribs. It feels like carrying a secret. A dense, quiet secret in a city that prefers illusions. You walk toward the next sound that pulls at your attention. A cartwheel creaking, a metal canister clinking, a familiar voice calling down the street. Milk and as. You follow that sound. Your eyelids begin to feel heavy. Not from boredom, but from the soft rhythm of the city repeating its rituals. Food, work, food again, work again. Breathe in, breathe out. The roll is warm, the street is cold, and somewhere ahead, a ladle dips into a canister that looks innocent. And the next layer of this quiet darkness waits. By late morning, the sky has that familiar Victorian colour, a pale grey, that never quite decides whether it is day or dusk. The light filters through smoke and damp, and everything looks softly blurred, as if the whole city is wrapped in thin wool. You keep walking with the warm roll in your coat pocket. It presses gently against your ribs each time you breathe, like a reminder that something honest can still exist in a place built on shortcuts. Then you hear it. A small clink of metal, a wheel complaining over cobblestone, a boy's voice, practiced and sing-song, calling into the narrow streets as if he is announcing a lullaby. Milk, fresh milk, milk today. You follow the sound without thinking, the way the body follows warmth. The cart is wooden, painted a tired pale blue, hitched to a horse with sleepy eyes and a heavy breath. The horse stands still in the drizzle, steam rising from its nostrils in slow, patient clouds. On the cart sit metal canisters, each one dented, each one scuffed. They catch the weak light and throw it back in dull flashes. A lad, sleeves rolled up, stands on the curb with a ladle and a stack of tin pitchers. He works quickly, dip, pour, hand off, coin, nod. The rhythm is almost soothing, like a metronome you could fall asleep to if you did not look too closely. And you do look, because now you cannot help it. The milk is not cold, it is not warm, it is tepid, sitting in that unsafe middle place, the place where time begins to change things quietly. You glance for ice, for damp cloths, for anything meant to protect the liquid from the day. There is nothing, only the canisters and the boy and the drizzle beading on the cart's paint. When he pours, the milk moves a little too thinly, not creamy, not rich, just eager to slide, like water dressed in white. You remember a line you once heard in a market, tossed out like a joke. There's more river than cow in that milk. It made you laugh then. It sits heavier now. Milk in this city is one of the easiest things to tamper with. You cannot weigh it with your eyes. You cannot test it with your tongue, unless you have the kind of palate that comes from leisure. Most people do not have leisure. They have hunger. They have children. They have the need to make tea taste less like bitterness. So the trick becomes routine. A little water to stretch it. A little chalk to keep it white. A touch of starch to thicken it back, to make it look like it has not been betrayed. And when it turns sour too quickly, no matter, a bit of borax or a pinch of baking soda to coax it into seeming fresh again. Not a miracle, just a mask. You watch the boy rinse a ladle in a bucket at his feet. The water is cloudy. The rag he uses has seen better days. He wipes the rim of a canister with a casual swipe that feels almost intimate, like wiping a mouth after a kiss. And you think, honestly, people are not buying milk here. They're buying trust. They're buying routine. They're buying the comfort of seeing the same cart on the same corner every morning. A woman in a shawl lifts her pitcher to the light, squinting. Her face tightens for a second. Then she shrugs. Good enough for tea, she murmurs, and walks away. Good enough. That phrase is everywhere in this city. It floats through streets like coal smoke. It settles into kitchens. It becomes a rule that no one wrote down. You stand near the back of the queue, letting the drizzle tap softly on your hat, and you imagine the milk's journey from a farm miles away, jolting over rough roads, sitting in uncovered cans, absorbing dust, heat, fumes. By the time it reaches the city, it is already tired. So the vendors give it a facelift. They do not call it deception. They call it survival. Someone once told you that early analysts found traces of lead in urban milk, not because anyone poured lead in deliberately, but because the cans were soldered poorly, seams that bled into the liquid over time, tin, copper residue, lime from washing buckets. Anything that touched it could leave a whisper behind. Whispers are how this city harms you. Nothing dramatic, nothing that makes headlines, just a slow accumulation of wrongness. A child in line swings his tin mug by the handle, bored. He receives milk, lifts it, and drinks straight away. A little runs down his chin. He makes a face, not disgust, just confusion, like the taste does not match the picture in his mind. Then he wipes his mouth with the back of his hand and smiles at nothing. That smile is what breaks you a little, because it is so ordinary, because it belongs to a world where children learn early that discomfort is normal. The cart creaks forward to its next stop. You follow at a distance, not stalking, just observing. Hooves splash in shallow puddles. The canisters clink softly with each bump, a gentle music of metal. The next street is narrower, lined with terrace houses. Flower pots sit in windows, struggling against soot. Another queue forms, different faces. Same routine. This time you notice something else. One woman leans close to the boy and whispers, "Extra thick today, yeah?" He winks. He nudges a different canister forward. Its spout is shinier from use. The milk that pours from it looks creamier, richer. It holds the light in a softer way. Too uniform, though, too perfect, like fabric that has been starched until it stops moving naturally. You have heard of this too. In wealthier neighborhoods, Milkmen sometimes add ground sugar, arrowroot, gelatin, even a little melted animal fat skimmed across the top to mimic cream. Not always toxic, not always scandalous, just another performance. And performance changes expectation. If people drink thickened milk every day, real milk begins to feel strange, too grassy, too rustic, too alive. You know that feeling, don't you? When something real tastes wrong, simply because you have been trained on imitation, the cart stops again. The boy pours again. Coins exchange again. The city repeats itself like a lullaby. A soft breeze moves through the street, carrying a smell of wet brick and chimney smoke. Somewhere a kettle whistles. Somewhere a door closes gently. For a moment it all feels peaceful. And that is the strange thing. Even inside a story like this, there is comfort. The comfort of routine, the comfort of warmth in the stomach, the comfort of tea made milky and sweet. You follow the cart a little farther than you meant to, until it turns into a courtyard behind a row of boarding houses. The stones here are uneven and dark with old damp. Laundry hangs on lines above your head like pale flags that have surrendered. A woman kneels by a wash tub, sleeves rolled, hands red from cold water. She glances up at the milk cart with the same expression you saw on the bakery customers yesterday. Relief, not excitement. Relief that something will fill the day. A door opens and warm air spills out, carrying the smell of cabbage and boiled grain. A little boy runs down the steps with a pitcher too big for his hands. His fingers grip the handle so tightly his knuckles look white. He stops at the cart, breathless. As if milk is a prize you must arrive early to claim. When the ladle pours, you can see it clearly in the courtyard light. The milk is thin. It hits the tin with a sound almost like rain. The boy does not notice. Or he does notice and has learned to pretend he does not. He turns and runs back inside. And because the door stays open a moment longer, you see a kitchen in a brief, private glance. A small table, a chipped mug, a loaf, white and soft, torn open rather than sliced. A woman stirring tea in a pot, adding milk until the liquid turns a comforting pale brown. The child sits. The mug is placed in front of him. He wraps both hands around it, warming his fingers. He drinks with a small sigh that seems too adult for his face. That moment, that tiny sigh, makes you understand something. Milk is not just food here. Milk is calm. Milk is a pause. Milk is the feeling of being cared for, even when the care is stretched thin. Your mind drifts to the quiet aches you have heard people mention, the way someone might mention weather, a sour stomach, a sluggish belly, a child with a cough that never quite leaves. No one calls it a crisis, they call it life. You step away from the courtyard and walk toward a small shop you have noticed before, a place that does not sell food, but seems to orbit it the way the moon orbits the earth. An apothecary. The window is filled with brown bottles, labels in elegant script, tonic powders, lozenges, soothing, syrups. The doorbell jingles softly as you step inside, and the air changes at once. Cooler, sharper. It smells of menthol and vinegar and old wood, like a cupboard that has been opened after years. A pharmacist stands behind the counter, tall, well-groomed, used to being listened to. His voice is quiet but certain, the kind of voice that makes people believe relief can be measured and sold. The woman at the counter asks for something gentle for the stomach. He hands her chalk powder, folded into paper. Another customer complains of sluggish digestion. He offers a bitter herbal liquid, best taken before tea. A third asks for something to clear the pipes, as he says with a tired half smile, and receives rhubarb tablets like small, dry promises. What strikes you is how ordinary it all is. No panic, no emergencies, just discomfort, routine, and remedies built to match routine. You glance at jars on a shelf. Magnesia, peppermint essence, bicarbonate of soda, licorice and charcoal lozenges, dark as little stones. The pharmacist catches your eye and gives a polite nod, as if to say, yes, we see this every day. And you realize the city has built a second market beside the first. For every sweet, a powder. For every white loaf, a tonic. For every cup of thin milk, a little packet of chalk to calm what the milk unsettled. It is a partnership. Food and medicine holding hands, walking the same streets. You step back outside, and the drizzle feels softer now, almost tender. The street sounds are muffled by damp. Your breathing slows without you asking it to. You look toward the corner where the milk cart has moved on. The horses' hooves are already farther away, splashing steadily. The queues have dissolved back into doorways and kitchens. The milk will become tea. Porridge, custard, small comforts. And in some cupboard, chalk powder waits patiently for later. You let that thought float away, not because it is untrue, because you do not want to grip it too tightly. Tight thoughts keep people awake. So you breathe, slow, in and out. The city repeats itself like a lullaby, and you let the rhythm hold you. Then, as you are standing under the shelter of an awning, listening to drops strike oilcloth in a steady, sleepy pattern, a new sound threads through the drizzle, a small bell ringing in a slow, cheerful pattern, a voice calling out with practiced lightness. Ice cream, fresh today. The milk ladle, the chalk powder, the thin tea, the tired child at the kitchen table. None of it disappears. It simply makes room for the next temptation. Two kinds of comfort can exist on the same street. One white, one cold, both smiling at you as if they are harmless. You take one more breath of wet air. You taste coal on your tongue. You feel the dense roll in your pocket, warm and heavy. And you turn toward the bell, letting the next layer of this city lead you by the hand. The bell keeps ringing as you step into the wider street. It is a small sound, almost childish, and it slices through the city's soot-heavy hush like a thin ribbon of silver. You follow it, weaving between shoulders and baskets, and the slow shuffle of boots. The cobblestones are slick from rain. Your soles find grip, then lose it, then find it again, and each step becomes its own quiet negotiation. The cart appears like a little travelling promise. A man in a checkered apron and a bowler hat pushes it with steady arms. His cheeks are red from cold. His breath puffs in soft bursts as he calls out, voice light, friendly, as if he is offering nothing more dangerous than joy. Inside the cart sits a tin basin packed around with straw. Meltwater drips steadily down the wood, making dark trails that look like tears. On top of the basin is a metal tub covered with cloth. The vendor lifts the cloth just enough to reveal a pale, shimmering surface. Ice cream, he says. Vanilla or lemon, if you like a bit of zest. It is tempting in a way that almost hurts. Cold food in a smoky city. A luxury that can be held in one hand. A penny for a scoop. A moment of sweetness that feels like it belongs to someone richer than you. You pay, and the coin is cold against your fingertips. The vendor scoops from the edge, scraping metal against frozen mixture with a sound that makes your teeth tingle. He wraps the scoop in a scrap of wax paper, folds it into a cone, and places it in your hand. It is firm. It is cold enough to sting. The paper begins to soften immediately from your warmth. You take a bite. The first taste is sweet, yes, faintly creamy. Then there is a sour note, barely there, like a whisper behind a curtain. And under that, something musty. Not rotten, not sharp, just old. The way damp cloth smells when it has been folded too long. You keep chewing. Everyone keeps chewing. No one wants to stop. Stopping would mean thinking, and thinking is not what people buy at a street cart. Your tongue notices the texture, grainier than it should be, wet at the edges. It melts too fast, as if it has been asked to pretend at being rich without having the structure to hold itself. Victorian ice cream is rarely made the way you imagine ice cream. Real cream is expensive. Fresh milk is unreliable. So the base becomes a blend. Milk, sometimes fresh, sometimes not. Sugar, or treacle, or saccharin, starch, arrowroot, flour. Anything that can thicken and fool the mouth into believing it is eating richness, flavouring essences. Vanilla that comes not from pods, but from chemicals derived from wood pulp or clove oil. Lemon that is not fruit, but oil. And the ice itself, that is the part that always makes me pause, because ice seems so pure in the mind, clean, cold, mountain-like. In the city, ice is practical. It is harvested from rivers and ponds in winter, stored under sawdust in pits, dragged out months later, chipped, carried, handled, melted, refrozen. Cleanliness is an aspiration, not a guarantee. Some vendors are careful. They boil milk. They scrub tubs. They try. Others work on speed. If it holds shape and tastes sweet, it sells. You lean against a post as you eat, watching children gather, their eyes shining with the same moth-like hunger you saw at the sweet stall. The vendor scoops dollops onto slices of stale bun to make little sandwiches, a clever way to stretch the serving. The children laugh as it drips down their fingers, and you feel that familiar softness in your chest again, because the joy is real, even when the ingredients are not. Rumours float through the streets about what else can end up in cheap ice cream. A hint of margarine, a smear of beef fat, milk revived with soda. Saltpeter used to hold cold longer. Even soap shavings, some say, to make it foam. You do not know what is true. The city loves a rumour. Rumour is a second kind of flavour. It makes everything taste sharper. What you do know is how your body feels, the cold in your mouth, the damp sweetness on your lips, the wax paper turning soft and translucent in your hand. You finish the cone anyway. Of course you do. People do not buy a penny treat to throw it away. Not in this city. As the cart rattles onward, its bell fading into the maze of alleys, the drizzle thickens a little. Awnings drip in steady rhythm. The street clears slightly as people tuck themselves under shelter. You keep walking, fingers sticky, coat smelling faintly of syrup and wet wool. Around the next corner, you find another frozen temptation. A shallow tin chest in a sweet shop window. Inside, little blocks of ices rest on trays of packed snow, rosewater, lemon, pistachio, though you suspect it has never seen a real nut. They glisten under glass, elegant and brightened with colour. A shopkeeper fans herself with a newspaper, bored, resigned. You ask how long the ice lasts today. Long enough, she says. Long enough to sell it before it puddles. That is the quiet rule of Victorian frozen sweets. Serve it before it surrenders. If it holds shape, it is fine. If it sags, sell it faster. Waste nothing. Time is the real enemy. Without mechanical refrigeration, ice cream is always a race. Against the sun, against the warmth of hands, against delay, even the chase becomes part of the charm. You have read or heard that some of these ices are flavoured with synthetic esters. Pear, banana, almond, pineapple. Scented imitations mixed in back rooms that smell of alcohol and vinegar. They can be convincing. They can also be too intense, as if childhood itself has been squeezed into a bottle. You think about Queen Victoria, about banquet tables where ices are served in carved dishes, snow gathered by servants from distant hills, real cream, imported fruits, a luxury that tastes like actual abundance. Then you look at the little block in this window, lightly blended behind the shop, frozen with lake ice, brightened with a dye, sold quickly before it becomes a puddle. Two worlds connected by one craving, sweetness on the tongue, a small escape from smoke. You step back into the street, the cold treat now only a memory on your lips. And as you walk, the smell of the city changes. Less sugar, more salt, more grease. A savoury warmth that pulls you toward another kind of stall. A narrow doorway with a swinging wooden sign reads, "Fine meats and sausage." The word "fine" feels like it is working overtime. Inside, the shop is dim, lit by a single gas lamp. The air smells of spice and something older, a meaty heaviness that does not quite say fresh. A butcher in a stained apron wipes his hands on a cloth and nods at you, not welcoming, not hostile, just accustomed to faces. Behind glass hang sausages in coils. Some are reddish-brown and plump, others are pale, speckled, oddly soft in their casing. A tray holds meat pies, palm-sized, crimped edges, crusts golden and inviting. Steam curls from a cracked lid like a sigh. You ask, softly, "What's in those?" The butcher shrugs. Beef in that one, pork in the other. Mostly. Mostly is another word that lives comfortably in this city. Victorian sausages, especially the cheap ones, are famously flexible. A little meat, yes, then rusk, breadcrumbs, suet, offcuts, cartilage. Gristle ground so fine you would never see it. If the meat is not quite fresh, spices can do miracles. Salt, pepper, vinegar. And colour. Colour always comes back. A touch of cochineal, iron oxide. Whatever restores the healthy hue the customer expects. You notice one sausage glistening unnaturally, not sweat from heat, a thin coat of fat brushed on to catch the light, freshness as performance, moisture as theatre. You buy a meat pie because it smells good, and because you are human, and because warmth in the hand can be persuasive. The crust is buttery. The filling is savoury, peppery even, too even, perhaps, as if it has been engineered to be unremarkable. You chew, and you try not to think too hard about what you are chewing. This is how the city wins. It does not need to hide poison under bitterness. It hides compromise under comfort. Outside, boys sit on the steps of a corner shop sharing a sausage roll. They pass it along, laughing. None of them ask what is inside. They do not need to. It tastes familiar, salty, warm enough. Pickling is everywhere in this world. Brine barrels, vinegar, saltpeter. Preservation is a kind of magic. In a city without reliable cold, it keeps meat from spoiling. It also keeps older meat from being wasted. Waste not, that phrase again, a moral and a business plan in a grocery stall. Nearby, a ham hangs in the window, perfectly pink, almost too pink. You remember hearing that saltpeter preserves colour, keeps meat rosy, even after months. It is effective. It is also another example of the city's obsession with appearance. Your mouth becomes aware of metal again, faint in the background, like a memory that refuses to leave. You swallow, you breathe, you keep walking. And as evening begins to settle, the gas lamps flicker on, one by one. The city softens at the edges. Shops glow like lanterns. Smoke lies flatter against rooftops. People move a little slower, shoulders drooping with the weight of the day. You pause on a corner and let your senses gather what you have seen. Bright sweets dusted with minerals. Bread whitened until it forgets grain. Milk stretched and corrected until it looks like itself again. Ice cream chasing cold with tricks and hope. Sausages held together by imagination and spice. At first they seemed like separate quirks, little oddities of a bustling age. Now they start to fit together, like pieces of a larger machine. Not a machine of villains, a machine of demand, of labour, of short breaks and long shifts, of mouths that want comfort in pockets that can only afford illusion. And you feel something else too, a strange tenderness, because even in this dark history, people are not trying to suffer. They are trying to get through. You take a slow breath, in and out. The street noise becomes a softer hum. Your eyelids begin to feel heavy, not with boredom, with rhythm. The rhythm of carts, the rhythm of chewing, the rhythm of coins. Somewhere far off, a bell rings again, faint now, like a memory of ice cream. Somewhere closer, a kettle starts to sing. And in your coat pocket, the dense roll from the old baker is still warm enough to remind you that honesty has weight. You let that weight settle you. You let the city fade a little, like a story told by candlelight. And you keep walking deeper into the quiet machinery of an empire that learned to feed itself quickly, cheaply, and just believable enough. Afternoon leans toward evening again, and the city begins to change its face the way it always does. The harsh edges soften, the smoke thickens, the light turns amber under gas lamps, and puddles become mirrors that ripple each time a wheel passes. You find yourself drawn toward a tea room. It is not a grand place, just a narrow shop tucked between a haberdasher and a tobacconist, with a small window fogged by warmth and breath. Inside, bentwood chairs sit close together. Porcelain cups are chipped at the rims. A counter holds buns and bread and butter slices under a cloth that looks clean if you do not stare too long. Tea is sacred here, in a way that feels almost religious. It belongs to everyone, factory hands, clerks, widows, children sent with pennies, even the well-dressed, where no one is watching. A cup of tea is 5 minutes, where the world cannot demand anything more than swallowing. You step in, and the bell gives a polite little jingle. Warm air wraps round you like a shawl. The room hums with soft conversation, cups clinking, spoons tapping saucers in a slow, familiar rhythm. You sit, not near the window, not near the door, somewhere in the middle where you can listen without being noticed. A girl brings a pot, dark and steaming, and sets it down with practiced care. The tea smells rich, malty, almost comforting. You pour. The liquid is deep brown, nearly black in the cup, and for a moment you feel that old relief rising in you, heat in the hands, bitterness in the mouth, a small anchor in a drifting day. You sip. It is warm. It is strong. Then you notice something, a strange aftertaste, slightly sour, slightly flat. Not the clean bitterness of leaf, more like the taste of something burned and then hidden under sugar. You swirl the tea and watch it move. It seems heavy, almost sluggish, like ink rather than infusion. A faint ring begins to form, where the liquid touches porcelain, greyish, not quite tannin brown. You know that feeling, don't you? When something is almost right, close enough to accept, and your body still whispers, quiet as breath, that it isn't what it should be. You remember a line from a cheap handbill you saw fluttering near the market. If your tea stains your fingers black, if it turns paper dark, the leaves may have been used already, then died back to life. It wasn't uncommon. In fact, it was routine. Affordable Victorian tea was often a second-hand thing, sweepings from warehouse floors, leaves already steeped, dried again, then recolored with iron salts, carbon black, sometimes indigo, so they could look bold and fresh to the eye. To fill weight, fragments of other leaves might be mixed in. Blackberry, sloe, anything that could crumble into a believable shape once it was darkened. Strength was the goal, not subtlety. Most people wanted a brew that could hold up to milk and 3 spoons of sugar. If it looked like soot and warmed the belly, it had done its job. You flag the girl down gently, voice soft, almost apologetic. What blend is this? She frowns, thinking as if you asked her, the name of the wind. Same as always, she says. Good quality. Folks like it strong. She is not lying, not in her mind. She is repeating what she was told. And that is another trick of the age, deception, that becomes tradition. You take another sip, slower. The warmth still works. Your shoulders loosen a fraction. Your eyelids feel heavier, not from fatigue alone, from ritual. Tea is not only a drink here. It is permission to rest without explaining yourself. The woman at the next table adds sugar in slow, careful spoonfuls. 1, 2, 3. She stirs until the spoon taps the cup in a steady pattern. Her expression softens. Her shoulders fall. Whatever is in her cup, it is doing what she needs it to do. You finish your tea, not because it is perfect, because it is enough. Outside, the air is colder. The street is darker. Gaslight spills in ribbons across wet stones. A cart rolls past, and the wheels make a sleepy clatter, like someone dragging a brush across gravel. You keep walking, and the smell of the river begins to creep in, damp, metallic, alive. It pulls you toward the docks, toward the part of the city where everything arrives and everything leaves. You find the tea broker's building like a secret. Low stone walls, soot-streaked. Inside, drawers and tins and stacked samples. The air is full of dried leaf scent, dusty and sharp, like old books. A clerk greets you, then returns to sorting a shipment, hands moving quickly, eyes not quite meeting yours. You ask quietly, "Do you get many returns?" He laughs, short and tired. "Only from the ones who know what they're drinking." He opens a tin and shows you leaves so dark they're almost purple. "Factory scrapings," he says. "Dried, dyed, sold again. Steep it long enough and it'll stain your mug for a week." He shrugs as if this is weather. You ask if people care. "Some," he replies. "Most folks want the strongest cup at the cheapest price. Doesn't matter where it comes from. Taste can be taught. That is one of the darkest truths in this whole walk. If an entire generation grows up drinking tea that tastes faintly of iron, then iron becomes part of comfort. Real tea, delicate and fragrant, begins to feel wrong, watery, weak. And so demand creates the very thing it demands. The broker offers you a cup of his own blend. Proper tea, loose leaf, full-bodied but clean. You sip, and the difference is immediate. Earthy complexity, no harshness, no grit. It tastes like a place rather than a trick. You ask if it sells. He smiles faintly. Not much, too subtle. People think it's gone off if it's not black as soot. He caps the tin. Another crate arrives through the door, marked for blending, not for brewing. In the back you hear the low hum of a grinder, turning old leaves into dust. That dust will be bagged, stamped, sold, carried home in pockets, steeped into 100 quiet kitchens by dawn. You step back outside, into fog that curls around your ankles like a cat. The dock air tastes of salt and coal. Somewhere a ship bell rings. Somewhere a rope creaks. Britain's empire is not only built on ships and flags, it is built on taste. Sugar from the Caribbean, tea from India, spices from far coasts, all flowing into these streets, then stretched, cut, coloured, and turned into something that fits the local pace and the local pocket. You pass a general store window, condensed milk tins with foreign stamps, blocks of cocoa substitute wrapped in wax paper, tea bricks stacked like small brown stones, everything concentrated, long-lasting, engineered to survive storage, travel, and the short minutes of a break. Food has become an engine, a bite at a time. And in the middle of that engine, you notice another kind of shop, quieter, not selling comfort, selling questions. A pamphlet stands outside a modest hall. A folded sheet flutters in the breeze. Its paper thin, its ink dark. Is your daily food deceiving you? You pick it up. Plain instructions, chalk, alum, red lead, simple tests with vinegar, heat, ink, not fear, more like guidance, an invitation to notice. You tuck it into your coat pocket and feel the paper press against the warm bread there. Knowledge against nourishment, question against habit. As you walk, you begin to see small signs of change. A baker's chalkboard that reads, no alum. A grocer's tin labelled tested. A mother steering her child away from a certain store without anger. Just certainty. It is not revolution. It is attention. And attention is sticky. Once it clings to you, it is hard to rinse off. The fog thickens as night gathers. Your footsteps sound softer now, muffled by damp and distance. Somewhere, far off, a lecture bell rings. Not the ice cream bell, a different bell, slower, more serious. You follow it not because you want drama, because you want answers. And perhaps, if we are honest, because answers can be strangely soothing. They give shape to fear. They put edges around the dark. You arrive at a cramped bookshop where chairs have been set in tight rows. The air smells of wet wool, tobacco, ink. An oil lamp burns at the front, haloing a jar of flour on a small desk. A man stands there with sleeves rolled up, chalk dust on his cuffs. A chemist, not a politician, not a preacher. Just someone who has spent too many nights looking closely at ordinary things. He dips a spoon into the flour and holds it up. This, he says, was taken from a shop on Longacre, sold as wheat flour, but it is not wheat alone. He demonstrates a pinch of flour in a dish, a drop of vinegar, a soft fizz, a tiny bubbles that look harmless, almost pretty. Chalk, he says, pipe, clay, sometimes bone dust. He does not shout. He does not perform outrage. He speaks as if he is teaching someone to tie a knot. Simple, clear, patient. A mother trying to stretch one loaf into two will feed her children with this, he says quietly, and she may never know why they cannot sleep at night. The room releases a small wave of breath, not a gasp, more like recognition. He moves on to sweets, toffee that sparkles, barley sugar that leaves a strange mark. He mentions copper in pickles, lead in bright candies. The words are heavy, yet the way he says them is calm, almost gentle, like a doctor explaining a bruise. Afterward, a woman raises her hand, voice trembling only slightly. What do we do with this knowledge, sir? He answers without hesitation. Share it. With your neighbors, with your grocer, with your alderman, with your children. And the way he says children makes the room fall quiet again, because everyone understands the future is being trained on whatever is cheapest. You leave with a pamphlet in your hand. The paper is warm from the heat of the crowded room. Outside, the fog feels thicker, the street quieter. Your breath makes small clouds. You walk home slowly. Each step is a soft scuff. Each lamp is a small island of gold. In your pocket, the pamphlet edges press against your fingers like a reminder that you are not powerless, you are simply tired. And tired people can still learn. They can still notice. They can still choose when they have the chance. You reach your room. The fire is low again. Candlelight trembles. You sit and let the city's sounds fade to a distant hum. If you listen closely, you can almost hear it. Not the market shouting, not the factory whistle, just the quiet turning of thought. A question steeping slowly, like tea. What am I swallowing? Breathe in and out. Let the question drift without sharpness. Let it be soft. Soft questions are easier to hold. Soft questions let you sleep. Night in London does not arrive like a curtain. It seeps in, it fills the gaps between bricks. It settles on shoulders. It turns every street into a corridor of low gold and deep shadow. You walk again, because this story is a walk, and the city keeps offering corners. Your breath moves slowly in the cold. The fog beads on your eyelashes, making the world feel softer at the edges, as if even reality is trying to lull you. You pass a printing house with windows glowing late. Inside, compositors work fast, fingers flying across trays of type. Lead letters, inked rollers, fresh sheets sliding out like pale tongues. The sound is steady. Clack, clack, clack. A heartbeat made of metal. You pause and watch through the glass. There is something eerie about it, honestly. Men making words that will travel farther than any cart, words that will slip into homes before dawn, folded beside bread and tea, speaking quietly into tired minds. A headline catches your eye on a proof sheet held up near a lamp. The chemist speaks what lurks in your bread. Another line beneath it, sharper, meant to be remembered. The miller may not lie, but the flour does. You feel a small chill that has nothing to do with weather. Because once a city's panic is printed, it becomes real. Not because it was false before, because now it has momentum. You keep walking and the streets begin to hum with that momentum. Not loud yet, more like a low vibration under the stone. A coffee house door is open, letting out heat and the smell of roasted beans. Inside, men in cravats and worn coats bend over papers. A woman in spectacles traces a paragraph with her thumbnail. Someone reads aloud in half mocking disbelief, half fascination. Then you notice the shopkeeper behind the counter has changed something. A different tin, a different jar, maybe even a different supplier. Not out of virtue, out of pressure, out of the simple fear of being named. You step away before the room, can pull you into chatter. Chatter is bright. You want the darker quiet, the kind of quiet that lets you sink. Down the street, a crowd gathers near a shop window. They are not staring at sweets. They are staring at a letter posted behind glass. The handwriting is plain, almost apologetic. Of 53 samples taken from grocers last week, 38 were found to contain harmful substitutes. 6 common jams, 4 bread loaves, 2 black teas. It is not a government notice. It feels like a leak, something meant to slide quietly into public view. And the crowd does not riot. No shouting, no stones, just silence. A man mutters, "That's the brand Margaret buys." A girl whispers, "We had that jam yesterday." You see hands move unconsciously to bellies, as if memory lives there first. That is how awareness grows. Not with speeches, with small personal flashes. You walk on. Your feet carry you toward a building along the Thames, grander than the streets around it. Stone columns, dark windows. Inside, candles still flicker behind glass. The House of Commons. You do not enter as a hero. You enter as a shadow in the gallery. Just another listener, quiet, anonymous, watching men decide what counts as important. The room is not full. A few MPs slouch on benches. Paper rustles. Someone coughs. The air smells of damp wool and ink and the faint old breath of the river. At the Single, a man stands and clears his throat. He holds up a paper bag filled with barley sugar. He pours one piece into his palm. Lovely, isn't it? He says it with a tone that makes the sweetness sound like an accusation. He reads from notes, tested last week, plaster of Paris, iron oxide, traces of copper sulfate. Another page. White bread consumed daily by labouring classes, alum digestive disturbances. Another page. Vinegar in half. The shops. Sulfuric acid. Someone scoffs. So what? It's vinegar. The poor have eaten worse. And there it is, the cold heart of it. Not cruelty exactly, just distance. A shrug turned into policy. The speaker is not demanding banners or riots. He asks for definitions. What is food? What should it contain? Who decides? The resistance in the room is thick, sleepy, stubborn. Would you have us inspect every loaf in every window? Another chuckles. The matter drifts lower on the evening schedule like a stone sinking in water. No bill is passed tonight. No dramatic turning point. Still, something has changed. Words have been spoken. Here, recorded. And once something enters the official record, it becomes harder to pretend it is only rumor. You leave the building and step back into the night. The fog feels colder near the river. Gaslight shivers on the water like a trembling candle. You wander toward a modest borough library, drawn by a softer hush. Inside, pages turn. Boots scrape on matting. The room smells of paper and dust, comforting in the way old rooms can be. A display sits near the entrance. A circular from a medical journal, results of food adulteration testing, borax in butter, copper sulfate in pickles, lead in cider, chalk in sugar. A shopkeeper in an apron stands beside you, brow furrowed. Trying to see if my vinegar made the list, he mutters, half joking, half not. You ask if it worries him. Of course it does, he says. But I can't charge more than the man next door. If he waters his milk, I have to, or I lose the trade. He folds the paper with care, almost like he is folding guilt. We all know it's wrong, he adds. Until it's illegal, it's just business. Business. The word that makes compromise feel respectable. You step outside with the pamphlet tucked into your coat. The street is quieter now, late enough that carts have thinned. Somewhere a lamplighter's footsteps echo. A distant whistle fades. The city is not asleep. It is dozing. As you walk, you begin to notice something new in the darkness. Chalkboards. Outside a bakery. Bread made with water, flour, yeast, nothing else. Outside a fishmonger. No yellow dye. Ask to see the gills. Outside a sweet shop. Licorice drops. No red lead. These signs are not laws. They are promises written in chalk, trusting that trust is worth something again. You pass a mother guiding her son through the market even at this late hour, maybe returning from a shift, basket lighter than she'd like. Not from that one, love, she says. He uses the chalk sugar. Her voice is not angry. It is practiced. That frightens and comforts you at the same time, because practice means this is becoming normal. You turn into a narrower lane where windows are smaller, shop fronts older. Here, light leaks out in warm rectangles. You smell baking, real baking, grain and spice rather than pure syrup. A modest door opens. A woman answers, aproned, sharp-eyed, busy. Her hands are dusted with flour, and the hallway smells like warm crust and cinnamon. She's not a chemist, not a politician, just a widow with 3 children and a habit of asking questions. In the back room, a table is set with tins, recipe cards, folded leaflets tied with twine. Don't be fooled by a shiny loaf, one leaflet reads. How to tell cochineal from copper, another. She pours you tea and it tastes plain, honest, a little weak compared to the soot-black brews of the street. Weak in the way real things can be, because they are not forcing themselves on you. People thought I was mad at first, she says, wiping her hands, sniffing bread, asking what's in jam. Then my daughter's cough stopped after we switched milk vendors. That's when I started writing things down. She shows you a notebook, names of stalls, notes, trusted, avoid, test with vinegar. look for rings in teacups. Others have joined her. One woman brings vinegar to market. Another clips newspaper lists. They meet once a week over oat biscuits to share what they know. No screaming, no marching, just the slow accumulation of attention. She shows you a letter from a grocer who stopped colouring his sweets. Not because of law, she says, with a small, tired smile. Because customers kept asking, you feel something warm in your chest. Not triumph, something quieter. Agency. You leave her house with a biscuit tucked into your pocket. It is still warm, and the warmth feels personal, like a hand on your shoulder. Outside, fog curls along the ground. Gaslight makes it look like drifting milk. You walk back toward the main road, and the contrast is stark. Windows glitter with coloured sweets. Loaves shine beneath glass. Tins promise pure, fresh, authentic. Words as decoration. Now you know the truth is not in words. It is in habits, in who you trust, in what you notice, in what you refuse. The city is still full of tricks, still full of shortcuts, still full of hunger that makes people accept what they should not have to accept. Yet the question is out now, moving from chemists' back rooms to kitchens, from pamphlets to parliament benches. A quiet question, steady as breath. What is in this? And because it is quiet, it can travel anywhere. You return to your room. The fire has fallen to embers. A candle burns low, its flame leaning slightly as if sleepy. You sit down and let your coat loosen around your shoulders. Listen. Outside, the city makes its nighttime music. A cart far away, a dog barking once, then stopping. Footsteps on whetstone. The low hiss of a gas lamp. Inside, your breath becomes the slowest sound. In and out. Your mind tries to hold the day's images. Milk ladles, dyed tea, chalkboards, printed headlines, a bag of barley sugar held up in Parliament. You let them loosen. You let them drift like fog. History does not always move with thunder. Sometimes it moves in teaspoons, in crumbs, in small refusals. Let that thought be gentle. Let it be soft enough to carry you. The city will keep turning while you sleep. Presses will keep clacking. Carts will keep rolling. Sweets will keep shining. And somewhere, very quietly, someone will keep asking. Breathe in and out. Now let the question fade into a hum, like distant wheels on cobblestone, and let the darkness become calm. Morning returns the way it often does in this city, not with brightness, not with birdsong, but with a soft lifting of fog, as if someone is slowly raising a grey curtain that was never fully closed. You wake to the sound of carts below your window. Wooden wheels, iron rims, a steady rattle that makes the glass tremble faintly. For a moment you lie still and let the rhythm do its work. It is almost like a lullaby made for grown people who cannot afford silence. The biscuit from last night is still in your pocket, wrapped in paper. When you touch it, it feels a little stale already. That makes you smile in a tired way. Freshness is always fleeing here. Time is the one thing no one can stretch. You dress slowly. You pull on your coat. It smells faintly of smoke, syrup, damp wool, and that clean, sharp edge of vinegar from the pamphlet you handled too much. Your fingers remember the texture of paper, the way ink slightly roughens the surface. Words have weight, and today you are going back into the streets with that weight inside you. Outside, London is waking. Shutters lift, doorways yawn. Steam rises from grates and drains in little ghostly spirals. You pass a bakery where loaves are being stacked in pyramids behind glass. The bread is very white, too. White. It looks like something that should belong in a drawing rather than in a stomach. A man in line taps one loaf with his knuckle. He listens to the sound as if he is testing a wall. Hollow, he mutters. Then he buys it anyway. You know that feeling, don't you? When you notice something is wrong and you still reach for it, because hunger is louder than suspicion, because your day has already asked too much of you, because you want comfort, not conflict. You keep walking toward the market, following scents that layer over one another. Coal smoke, wet stone, cabbage, roasted nuts. Somewhere a sweet shop has opened its door and the air spills out, buttery and warm, inviting like a hand. At the market square the stalls are already busy. Vendors call out with voices made theatrical by habit. Children cluster near trays of bright candies. Workers move fast, coin in hand. Eyes on the clock tower, as if time itself is standing there watching them. And beneath the noise there is something else today, a thin thread of talk, not laughter, not gossip about neighbours, a different kind of murmur, chalk, alum, copper. You hear the words drifting between baskets and sleeves, soft and quick, like people are afraid the syllables might summon trouble. Near a jam stall, a woman holds up a spoon. She dips it into a paper tub of strawberry jam. The jam is glossy, red as a painted door. She lifts the spoon and squints. Then she rubs the jam between finger and thumb, slow, thoughtful. The stall-holder shifts his weight. He smiles too widely. "It's fine, madam," he says. "Same recipe as always." She looks at him and says quietly, "Why does it stain the spoon?" The question hangs there for a second like fog in sunlight. Not dramatic, no shouting, just a pause. The stall-holder's smile tightens. He laughs. Just once. You people hear one rumour and think you're all scientists. She does not argue. She simply sets the spoon down, wipes her fingers on her skirt, and walks away. That is what change looks like here. Not a riot. A woman walking away. You watch the stallholder's eyes follow her, and you see something flicker there. Not anger, fear, because a stall can survive bad ingredients. It cannot survive bad reputation. You move on, letting the crowd carry you. A sweet seller offers conversation lozenges in bright pink and lemon yellow. The colors glow under gaslight even in morning. A child reaches, coin already sweating in his palm. His mother catches his wrist gently. "Not from that one, love." He uses the bright stuff, as if color itself has become suspicious. The boy frowns, confused, and the mother does not explain. She just guides him toward a different stall where the sweets look duller, less exciting, more like ordinary sugar. The boy resists for a heartbeat, then follows. He is learning a lesson without knowing its name. You find yourself stopping at a stall you have not noticed before. It does not glitter, no neon colors, no theatrical shouting, just brown paper, bags, dark loaves, oat cakes, simple biscuits. A small sign hangs above the table. Ask what's in it. The man behind the stall is young, sleeves rolled, hands dusted with flour. He looks tired but steady. A woman asks about sweeteners. Treacle, he says. Real treacle, not saccharin. A man asks about flour, stone, ground, rye, local. Another woman sniffs a biscuit and asks if there's alum. No, he says, and meets her eyes without flinching. There is something almost tender about the exchange. People asking questions the way they might ask about weather. Not accusing, just wanting to know. You buy a small oat cake. It is plain. When you bite, it resists your teeth a little. It tastes of grain and salt and something faintly nutty. No perfume flavor, no metallic aftertaste. It fills your mouth slowly, in the way real food does. And as you chew, you feel your shoulders drop, a tiny easing, like your body recognizes honesty. You always forget how much tension you carry until something lets you set it down. The market keeps humming, but you notice more signs now. A baker has 2 baskets of bread, one labelled regular white, the other labelled no alum. The second costs a penny more. A woman hesitates, counts coins, then chooses the no alum loaf anyway. Her fingers press into the crust as if she needs to feel proof. She nods once, satisfied, and walks away. A fishmonger has a chalkboard sign. No yellow dye. Ask to see the gills. A butcher has clipped a newspaper cutting beside his sausages. No saltpeter used here. He stands with arms crossed, expression firm, as if daring anyone to doubt him. The city is learning to advertise honesty the way it used to advertise shine. You drift toward a narrow street behind the market where the noise fades. Here, shop fronts are smaller. Windows are smeared with soot. A door stands open to a little room that smells of vinegar and paper. On the window is painted a strange phrase, chemical food testing inquiries. Inside, jars sit on shelves, like a pantry for ghosts. A peppermint sweet split in half under glass. A slice of white bread in a bell jar. A jar of jam that looks more like gel than fruit. Each labelled with what it has been tested for. Alum, lead, chalk, copper, sulfate. A man stands behind the counter with rounded spectacles and ink on his cuffs. He looks like someone who has spent his life leaning over small things. He greets you with a faint smile that is not warm, not cold, just knowing. People come in here with doubt, he says quietly. They leave with awareness. He shows you a binder filled with handwritten entries. Milk from Candler Street, 35% water, slightly alkaline, chalk likely. Barley sugar, plaster of Paris detected. Tea blend, iron salts, used leaves suspected. He speaks as if listing weather patterns. Then he shows you the tools, small vials, droppers, wire loops, a dish for vinegar, a simple strip of paper for blotting. You touch the edge of the binder and your fingertips come away with a faint dust of chalk from somewhere. It is ridiculous how easily the city leaves residue on you. The man demonstrates on a sample of flour, a pinch in a city tan. Dish, a drop of vinegar. Bubbles again, soft and quick, like a tiny sea. Chalk, he says, not deadly in a single loaf, but day after day it changes you, it dries you, it slows you. He does not say it to frighten. He says it the way one might say damp air gives you a cough. You ask how people respond. Some listen, he shrugs. Others say they'd rather not know. Not if it spoils the taste. Truth versus comfort. It is always that, in the end. You leave with a leaflet folded into your pocket. The paper is thin. The ink smells faintly of metal. Outside, the street feels louder, even though nothing has changed. It is your hearing that has sharpened, your attention that has learned to listen. As you walk back toward the river, you notice more pamphlets, more chalkboards, more quiet arguments that do not become fights, just tension. A grocer insists his jam is fruit-flavored. A customer asks, and what is fruit exactly? The grocer laughs too loudly and changes the subject. In the afternoon you pass a public hall. A notice is posted, corners curling in damp. Lecture tonight, the chemistry of daily food. You picture the room, crowded with coats and tired faces. A lamp on a desk, a jar of flour, held up like evidence. You picture the soft fizz of vinegar, the quiet wave of breath from people realizing their dinner might be a lie. And you feel, strangely, not panic, a kind of slow, heavy calm, because when you name the darkness, it stops being a monster in the corner. It becomes a thing you can look at, a thing you can measure, a thing you can one day change. Evening settles again. The gas lamps hiss to life. The market's shouting fades into softer calls. Your feet carry you home with a steady weariness. At your door you pause. You listen to the city for a moment. The clack of a distant press, the rattle of a cart, the faint laughter of a child who has managed somehow to find sweetness. You breathe in, smoke, damp, bread. You breathe out, and you let the thought settle in you like warm tea. This is not a perfect city. It may never be, but it is beginning to watch itself. And when a city starts watching, even the deepest habits begin to shift, slowly, like fog lifting, one breath at a time. Back in your room, you set the oat cake on the small table beside the fire. It looks humble in candlelight. A rough circle of grain, edges uneven, no shine, no theatrical colour. When you break it, it snaps with a dry little sound. Crumbs fall like pale dust onto the wood. You eat slowly. Each bite takes time to soften, to become swallowable. That slowness is a kind of medicine. It forces you to stop racing, forces your jaw to work, forces your mind to stay in your mouth for a moment instead of wandering through worries. The candle flame leans as if sleepy. Wax pools. The room smells of smoke and paper and the faint, clean sting of vinegar from the leaflet in your pocket. Outside, fog presses against the window like a listening ear. You think about the woman who walked away from the jam stall. No anger, no speech, just the quiet choice of her feet. You think about the boy guided away from bright sweets, how a hand on a wrist can redirect a whole future. And you think about the chemist with ink on his cuffs, patient as stone, dripping vinegar onto flour, as if he is baptizing the city into a new awareness. It is dark history, yes. A million small compromises. A nation learning to eat illusions. But there is a softer story braided through it, and it is the one that makes your eyelids heavy. People noticing, people learning, people asking. Breathe in and out. Let the market noise fade. Let the chalk words blur. Let the pamphlets fold themselves shut in your mind. All that remains is the slow hiss of the fire, the distant clatter of a cart, and the steady comfort of knowing that even in a city built on shortcuts, truth can still seep in quietly like dawn. The next day, the city feels restless. Not in the way a crowd feels restless before a parade. In a quieter way, like a body shifting in sleep, uncomfortable, half aware, not ready to wake but unable to sink back down. You notice it in the small things, in the way people sniff twice before buying, in the way fingers press bread as if searching for hidden powder, in the way a shopkeeper wipes his counter a little harder than usual, as if cleanliness could erase suspicion. And then, almost without meaning to, you begin walking away from the market streets, away from the bright stalls and the familiar corners, toward the outskirts where the buildings stretch longer and lower and the air grows stiller, heavier. You follow the direction of smell, not the scent of fresh bread, not even the burnt sugar tang of candy. A different smell, uniform, sweet, yes, but flattened, as if sweetness has been pressed into a single note and held there. Sugar, grease, something faintly flowery that feels more like a bottle than a blossom. Ahead, a new kind of structure sits like a sleeping animal, long, low, windowless, except for a few high panes smudged with soot. A wooden sign hangs above the door, letters painted bold. Cratton's Foods, Limited. The sign looks proud. The building looks indifferent. You stand for a moment outside, listening. There is a hum behind the walls. Not voices, not laughter. A steady mechanical sound, like breathing made of gears. A loading bay yawns open. Crates are stacked like blocks. Men move with practiced speed, shoulders hunched under weight. A foreman steps toward you, brisk but not unfriendly. His boots, leave wet marks on the stone. His hands are clean in the way factory hands can be clean, wiped often, never truly free of residue. He asks what you want. You tell him, softly, that you are curious, that you want to see how the city is being fed now. He smiles as if that is the only sensible question left. Efficiency, he says, and the word comes out like a prayer. That's the future. He leads you inside. The air changes immediately. Warmth rises from machines. Syrup steam hangs thick and sweet, clinging to your throat. The floor is damp in places, sticky in others. Light from high windows falls in pale shafts, catching dust that swirls like slow snow. And the sound belts, chains, metal tapping metal. A low churn, steady, hypnotic, almost soothing if you let your mind blur. Rows of gears turn in rhythm. Large drums rotate, mixing thick golden syrup that flows down metal chutes into trays. At one end, dough is portioned and pressed by mechanical arms. No flour-dusted hands shaping loaves with care. Just levers, steel, timing. Each loaf comes out identical to the one before. Uniform size, uniform color, uniform weight. There is something eerie about that sameness. It reminds you of soldiers lined up in a courtyard, or teeth in a jaw. Natural things are never this, identical. Only manufactured things. A boy brushes biscuits with a light syrup as they roll past on a conveyor. The syrup gives them shine. The foreman notices your gaze and nods. Makes them look fresh longer, he says. Even after they sit on shelves a while, you lean closer. The biscuits are round, golden, faintly sweet-smelling, beautiful, in a way that feels slightly wrong. You imagine them in a tin on a shop shelf, catching gaslight, promising comfort. You ask what makes the shine. He shrugs. A blend, margarine, starch, the touch of colorant. He says it casually, like naming weather again. At another station, tins are being filled with something labeled meat essence. A man stands over the funnel, expression blank, hands moving fast. You ask what's in it. He chuckles. Beef extract, salt, flour, a bit of yeast. Enough to flavor water if you're making soup. No actual beef, of course. Not much room in the budget for that. No actual beef. The phrase lands gently, like a feather that still somehow bruises. You walk past stacked crates, labeled fruitcakes. The foreman taps one with his knuckles. Long keep, he says. You glance around. No fruit in sight. No piles of raisins. No boxes of citrus. Just barrels of syrup. Sacks of flour. Small bottles of essence lined on a shelf like medicine. You spot a tray of glossy cherries. They look jewel bright. Too perfect. You ask where the cherries come from. Apple pulp, the foreman says. Dyed and glazed. People don't taste the difference if the spice is strong enough. He says it without shame. Not proud, not guilty. Simply practical. This is not deception in the old sense. Not a man in a back room adding chalk to stretch flour. This is manufacture. Standardized, scalable, repeatable. Food as product. You walk deeper into the factory. The smell thickens. Sweetness becomes almost tiring, like perfume worn too heavily. You feel it coat your tongue even without eating. Your body is being fed by air. A crate marked lemon drops fine quality has broken open. Candies spill across the wooden floor like tiny jewels. Up close, they are less dazzling. Dust dulls them. They stick slightly to one another, not because they are fresh, because they are glazed with something that resists air. You pick one up between finger and thumb. It is smooth, hard, too light. It feels more like a bead than a sweet. You ask what gives them their flavor. Lemon oil, sometimes, the foreman says. Often essence from coal tar. Smells right, so it's good enough. Coal tar. The word is dark in your mind, thick as soot. Yet he says it like it is nothing. He catches your expression and adds, gently, almost offensively. Doesn't hurt anyone, at least no one we hear from. No one we hear from. That is the ghost sentence of industry. Pain that cannot afford to write letters. Bodies that ache quietly and keep working. Stomachs that slow down and blame fog, stress, damp air. Everything but the biscuit. A trolley squeaks past, carrying tins of condensed milk, boxes of starch biscuits, bars labelled fortified breakfast paste. Everything shelf-stable. Everything designed to survive months in storage, weeks in travel, and minutes in someone's mouth. You realize, standing there, that this factory is not only feeding London, it is feeding distance. The foreman tells you some crates go to Manchester, some to rail depots, some to the docks, some abroad. Abroad, he says again, and points to a stack of tins with stamps meant for other ports, other tongues. The colonies eat this stuff up, he says, not proud, just inevitable. Food that moves with empire. Food that does not rot because nothing inside it was ever fully alive to begin with. You pause near a table where labels are being applied. A woman presses paper onto tins with quick, practiced hands. Words flash by. Pure, fine, genuine, improved. You think of how words shift just fast enough to stay ahead of truth. No beef becomes beef-flavored. Fruit cake becomes spiced cake with fruit essence. Pure tea becomes tea blend finest quality. Accuracy dancing just outside reach. You watch workers taste samples. A biscuit snapped in half. A lick of syrup from a finger. A small laugh. To them it is food. To them it is pay. To them it is routine. No one here is cackling like a villain. No one is plotting poison. That is what makes it dark. A system can harm without malice. It can grind people down with nothing but efficiency. The foreman leads you toward the exit. Outside, the air is colder and feels almost clean despite the smoke. Your coat smells strongly of syrup now. It clings to you like a memory. In the distance, a train whistle calls. Long, low, mournful. You imagine the crates moving already, rolling away from this building toward other mouths, other hands, other tired lives. As you walk back toward the city, your steps slow. Your thoughts feel heavy, not panicked, just aware. You always feel strange after seeing the inside of something. A bakery, back room, a chemist's binder, now a factory line. Illusions are comforting from the outside. Inside, they are just mechanisms. When you reach a quieter street, you stop by a small shop window. A modest display, brown loaves, oat cakes, a chalkboard sign, no substitutes sold. The window is not bright, it does not glitter, it simply waits. You stand there longer than you meant to, watching your own reflection faintly in the glass. Fog curls around your ankles. Gaslight pools on wet stones. Somewhere a cat slips through shadow. You feel tired in the deepest way, not only in muscles, in attention. So you do what the city has taught you to do. You choose one small comfort. You step into the shop. You buy a plain roll. It is warm. It smells like grain and earth. You take it home. You sit by the fire. You tear it slowly, letting steam rise. You eat with care, chewing until your jaw relaxes, until your breath slows. Breathe in and out. Let the factory hum fade. Let the conveyor belts dissolve into the soft hiss of embers. Let the labels blur, Tonight, you do not need to solve the city. You only need to rest inside it. And as you settle, you allow one gentle thought to drift through you, light as ash. Even machines cannot stop dawn. Even factories cannot seal every crack. Truth leaks in, not loudly, quietly, steadily, like warm bread in your hands. You place the last crumbs on your tongue and notice how silence tastes. A little smoky, a little dry, not sweet, not bright, just real. Outside, the city keeps moving. But in this room, time slows down to the pace of a candle. The flame trembles, then steadies. Shadows sway across the wall like slow water. You can hear the soft tick of cooling iron somewhere in the hearth, a sound so small it feels private. And you think, honestly, about how progress is always described as a straight line, forward, upward, clean. It is never that. It is messy, it is sticky, it is people trying to survive a day and choosing what works. A cheap biscuit that holds together, a loaf that looks respectable on a table, a cup of tea dark enough to feel strong. No one wakes up deciding to be fooled. They wake up deciding to get through. Let that be a gentle truth, not a harsh one. Breathe in and out. If your mind drifts back to the factory, imagine the belts slowing. Imagine the drums of syrup turning quieter. Imagine the last tray of biscuits cooling, steam lifting like a sigh. Then let the doors close, not with a slam, but with the soft click of a latch. Now the only sound you need is your own breath, slow and steady, and the distant city softened by fog, as if London itself is lowering its voice for you. Night slips away, and the city gives you another morning that looks almost gentle. Fog still hangs, but it is thinner now, like gauze pulled across the streets instead of a blanket. Water drips from gutters in slow, patient drops. A sparrow lands on a railing, shakes itself, and looks around as if even birds are learning to be cautious. You step out early, not because you are eager, because the city has started to feel like a question you cannot stop carrying. And questions have a strange way of waking you. The main road is already awake. Milk carts, bread boys, men with crates on their shoulders, boots splashing through shallow puddles, everything moving with that familiar purpose, that determined pace of people who cannot afford to wander. You pass a chemist's shop and see a new sign in the window written in neat chalk letters, vinegar test kits, available today. A week ago, you might have laughed. Now you pause, because a simple kit means someone expects customers to test their own food. That means trust is changing shape. It is no longer a face you recognize behind a counter. It is vinegar in a bottle and bubbles in a dish. Inside the shop, a clerk is tying small parcels with string. A woman waits, bonnet pulled low, hands red from cold. She takes her parcel and tucks it into her basket like it is bread. You keep walking toward the market, and you notice something else. People are looking down more, not at their feet, at what they are holding. A man unwraps a bun and sniffs it before biting. A girl taps a sweet against her tooth, listening for that wrong kind of hardness. A mother holds a jar of jam up to the light, turning it slowly, as if she expects the truth to float to the top. You always see these gestures, once you know how to look. They are small, quiet, almost tender, a kind of care that has nowhere else to go. At the market square, the stalls are busy, but the mood is different, a little sharper, a little more watchful. A fishmonger argues with an older man carrying a notebook. The customer prods a slab of haddock with a stick. Bit too bright, don't you think? The fishmonger scowls. Salt and smoke, he says. Same as always. The customer squints again. Looks more like chromate of potash to me. People used to argue about weather. Now they argue about colour. A butcher down the row has clipped a newspaper cutting beside his sausages. He stands with arms crossed, jaw tight, daring the world to doubt him. No saltpeter used here, the sign says. He looks like a man defending not only meat, but pride. Near the sweet cellars, children still gather like moths. Of course they do. Sweetness is the one bright thing the city keeps offering. But even here, you see hesitation. A woman leans toward a vendor and asks, soft as a secret, "What makes your green so green?" The vendor laughs. "Apple," he says. She does not laugh back. She asks again, slower, "What makes it green?" He shifts, then points vaguely to a sack under the counter. "Just a pinch, madam, just enough to please the eye." That phrase again, please the eye. And the woman quietly chooses a different stall. No speech, no drama, just a small decision with a big shadow behind it. You drift toward the edge of the square where pamphlets are being sold, 1 penny each. The Working Man's Guide to Honest Fire, how to spot a fraudulent loaf, detect copper in pickles, avoid poison in sweets. A boy with ink-stained fingers says they sold out yesterday. Printer's doing another run today, he says, proud, as if he is selling tickets to a play. You buy one, the paper is thin, the ink is fresh. When you fold it, it makes a soft crackle like dry leaves, and as you walk, you see the way information travels, not like a lecture, like gossip, a whisper that becomes a habit. At a tea shop, 2 clerks lean over their mugs. They say some cheap teas aren't even leaves. One whispers, just dried blackberry and iron shavings. The other nods, eyes wide, half amused, half unsettled. And the jam. Have you heard about the bone paste? The words float above their cups like steam. Then they sink into the room. Then they leave with people when they stand up. This is what the city is made of. Not stone, not smoke, stories. And now the stories are about what is inside the things that keep everyone alive. Later, you pass a bakery in Bloomsbury with a chalkboard sign outside. Bread made with water, flour, yeast, nothing else. Inside, the shelves are half full. The bread is darker, heavier, not pretty in the fashionable way. The baker wipes his hands on his apron and glances toward the door every few seconds. Nervous, hopeful. Honest bread doesn't puff like the rest, he tells you quietly. Doesn't stay snow white, but I'd rather lose a few customers than sell poison. You always feel la longue when someone admits that kind of thing without being asked. It is like hearing someone confess in a church that has no priest. You buy a small rye roll. It is dense, chewy. When you bite, it resists you just enough to feel real. You chew slowly and feel your belly settle in a way that makes you almost sad, because you realize how long you have lived with food that disappears too quickly, leaving only hunger behind. Outside again, the fog has lifted a little more. The river smells of damp and coal. You walk along it until you reach a public notice board near a bridge. A new paper has been posted. Proposal for a standard food bill to be read next month in Commons. The words are plain. No flourish, no promise of miracles. Just the quiet statement that someone, somewhere, is trying to define what food must be. People stop and read it. A man in a cap scratches his chin. A woman adjusts her basket on her arm. No one cheers. No one jeers. They simply look. And looking is the first act of change. As afternoon stretches, you find yourself drawn to another lecture. A small hall, cold stone walls, wooden chairs packed close. An oil lamp at the front. A jar of flour again, because flour is everywhere, and so is the question of what has been mixed into it. The speaker is a physician this time, older, voice, steady. He does not shout about villains. He speaks about patterns, stomach troubles rising, sluggish digestion, children who cannot sleep, people blaming damp air, long shifts, city stress. He lifts a loaf of bread, white as chalk. He breaks it in half. The crumb looks like sponge, too airy, too clean. He says a lum is not a monster that kills in a night. It is a slow hand, drying, irritating, turning discomfort into routine until you forget what comfort felt like. He says it calmly, almost kindly, and that is what makes it sink in. A room full of tired people can accept calm truth more easily than loud fear. After the talk, a mother asks what she should do if she cannot afford the honest loaf. The physician pauses. His eyes soften. He says, do what you can. Ask questions. Share what you learn. And when you cannot change the bread, at least change the belief that you deserve to be lied to. That last line lands like a stone in water. No splash, just ripples. You leave the hall as dusk returns. Gas lamps flicker alive, one by one. Shadows stretch long on wet cobblestone. The city looks the same, and yet it does not feel the same, because now, when you pass a sweet shop, you see the chalkboard sign that reads, "No red lead." When you pass a grocer, you see a tin labelled "tested." When you pass a butcher, you hear a customer ask, "How old is that meat?" Truly, it is not perfect. Some vendors are honest, some are furious. Some are tired and will do anything to keep their stall open. The old system does not vanish because a pamphlet says it should. Still, the air is changing. Not the fog, the air of attention. You walk home with your rye roll and your pamphlet, feeling a quiet heaviness in your limbs. You sit by the fire. The embers glow. The candle flame leans, sleepy. You open the pamphlet again, not to memorize, just to feel that someone tried to write a path through this maze. A teaspoon of vinegar in flour. If it fizzes, beware. Tea that stains your fingers black. Sweets that smell like varnish. Simple signs, small protections. A kind of armor for ordinary people. You fold the paper and set it down. You eat the last of your roll slowly, letting the chewing calm you, and you think honestly about how care is not always soft. Sometimes care is a question asked twice. Breathe in and out. Let the market noise drift away. Let the lecture hall fade. Let the posted notice blur in your mind. Tonight, you do not need to solve the century. You only need to rest inside it. And while you rest, remember this gentle thing. The city is learning to taste again, slowly, clumsily, with vinegar bottles and chalkboards and tired voices. That is how revolutions begin here. Not with fire, with attention. Now let your breath slow. Let the fog settle outside like a quiet coat. Let your thoughts soften until they are only the warmth of embers and the distant roll of carts. And sleep knowing that somewhere, even now, someone is reading a label. Someone is asking. Someone is walking away from a lie. Quietly, steadily, like dawn. Later, when the room has grown quieter and your tea has gone lukewarm, you hear the city's other heartbeat. Not carts, not markets, the press. Somewhere beyond your window, in a building with glowing panes, compositors set lead letters into lines. You can almost imagine the sound, a soft clink, a shuffle, ink rolled across metal, fresh paper pulled warm from the machine. It is strange, the way printing feels like cooking. Ingredients, heat, pressure. Then something new comes out, ready to be consumed. The next morning those sheets will be everywhere, folded under arms, pinned in shop windows, read aloud in coffee houses, and tucked into pockets beside coins and crumbs. You think about that and you feel a small chill, not of fear, of recognition. Because once the press joins the pantry, the story cannot be pushed back into silence. You remember a crowd you saw yesterday near a shop window. They were not staring at sweets. They were staring at a letter posted behind the glass. A local inspector's note, plain and apologetic, listing how many samples were taken and how many were found to contain substitutes. No brands, no grand accusations, just numbers that still felt like a hand on the throat. You remember the way the crowd went quiet, not angry, just suddenly aware. A man muttered, "That's the brand Margaret buys." A girl whispered, "We had that jam yesterday." Then people stepped away, one by one, hand on stomach, as if memory itself had become physical. That is how information becomes real. Not when it is announced, when it matches a feeling someone already had and could not name. You lean back in your chair by the fire and let the thoughts soften. Even this darkness has a gentle edge if you look carefully. It is a darkness that teaches people to care for themselves and for each other. A mother sharing a warning, a baker choosing heavier bread, a clerk switching suppliers because customers are asking. The candle burns lower, wax pools, your eyelids grow heavy. Breathe in and out. Let the press clink fade into silence. Let the crowds dissolve. Let the numbers blur until they are only the sense that the city is waking, slowly, to its own body. And as you drift, keep one quiet image. A small teaspoon, a drop of vinegar, a simple fizz. Not magic, just proof. Sleep now, with that proof tucked gently into the corner of your mind, like a folded leaflet kept for tomorrow. The night feels deeper now, the kind of deep that makes even a city seem to breathe more slowly. You wake before dawn again, not startled, just gently pulled from sleep by a sound you can barely name. A distant bell, a horse shifting its weight, rain tapping the window like a patient fingertip. You lie still and listen. The room is dark, except for the faint orange bruise of embers in the hearth. The candle has burned down to a stub. Wax has hardened in little ridges, frozen mid-drip. Everything looks paused, as if time itself is holding its breath. And then, from somewhere far away, you hear it. Not the market, not the carts. A whistle, a train, calling out through the fog, low and mournful. It reminds you that the city is connected to everything. Ports, factories, farms, colonies. Food moving like blood through an empire, carrying sweetness, carrying starch, carrying whatever people can afford to swallow. You sit up slowly, wrap your coat tighter, and decide to walk. The streets before sunrise are different. They belong to cleaners, bakers, milkmen, and the people who cannot sleep. The cobblestones shine with rain, reflecting gaslight in long, trembling ribbons. Fog curls around your ankles like a cat. As you walk, you notice how quiet can still hold tension. A closed shop window with yesterday's sign. No alum, no dyes. Tested. Honest. Promises written in chalk feel fragile in rain. One hard splash and they smear. And yet people keep writing them again and again, as if repetition itself might turn promise into law. You pass a coffee house where lights are already on. Inside, a few men in creased coats bend over newspapers. Their fingers are ink-stained, their faces tired. One reads aloud, voice low, as if speaking too loudly might wake the city's old habits. City council demands flour standards, he says. Chemist exposes tricks of pickle trade. Is your tea safe? What every family should know. The paper crackles when he turns it. The sound is oddly comforting. A small proof that someone bothered to print the truth. You step back outside and keep walking until the buildings change. Stone turns to something grander. Columns, wide steps. a shadow that feels official, the House of Commons. It sits there like a heavy book that does not like being opened. Tonight, there is no parade, no protest, just a session tucked halfway down the evening schedule, the kind of gathering that rarely makes headlines. Still, you find yourself slipping into the gallery, quiet as breath, as if you belong there simply because you have been listening long enough. The chamber is not full. A few MPs slouch on benches, thumbing through reports, murmuring into beards. The air smells of damp wool and paper and faint candle smoke. It is the smell of governance, not glamorous, just tired. A man stands to speak. He is not fiery, not theatrical. He clears his throat as if apologizing for taking space. He holds up a paper bag. Barley sugar, he says. A few heads lift, a few eyes narrow. He tips the bag and lets one piece tumble into his palm, then holds it up to the light. Lovely, isn't it? His voice stays calm, almost gentle. Tested last week, he continues. Contains plaster of Paris, iron oxide, traces of copper sulfate. Someone scoffs. So what? It's sweets. Children have always eaten rubbish. The speaker does not argue. He turns a page in his notes. The white bread, consumed daily by our labouring classes, he says, has been found to contain alum, an astringent known to cause digestive disturbances. Nothing dramatic, nothing you can point to in a single night, just a slow discomfort turned into routine. Another page, vinegar in. Half the shops of Lambeth cut with sulfuric acid. Another scoff. It's vinegar. The poor have eaten worse. You watch the scene and you feel that strange ache again. Not anger. A quiet sadness. Because this is how harm hides. Behind shrugs. Behind the tired joke that someone else has had it worse. Behind the belief that survival means accepting anything. The speaker sits down. No thunder follows. No vote. No sudden reform. Just the sound of paper rustling, benches creaking, men shifting like they want to return to easier subjects. And yet, something has changed. You glance toward the clerk's table and see a stack of letters. Real letters, folded, sealed. Some stained slightly at the edges, as if they travelled in pockets beside bread. Appeals from housewives, local doctors, food testers, school teachers. You lean forward just enough to catch a line from one letter left open. We do not demand luxury, only safety. We ask not for cream, but for milk. We ask not for fruit, but for jam. That is not plaster. It is not poetry. It is better than poetry. It is need made plain. You leave before the session ends. There is nothing more you can do by watching. Still, you carry the image of those letters like a warm coal in your palm. Outside, the fog has thickened again, and rain begins to fall, soft at first, then steadier. The city's lamps glow like small moons in puddles. Your footsteps splash in a slow rhythm. As you walk, you think about what you have seen. Markets, chemists, factories, lectures, now Parliament. It would be easy to turn it into a neat story, a villain, a hero, a sudden victory. But history rarely gives that kind of gift. It gives something slower, 1,000 small acts of attention. A mother switching milk vendors because her child's cough finally stopped. A baker raising prices by a halfpenny and still selling out because customers are noticing. A grocer rewriting his label from pure to blend. Because the paper's watching now. You know the feeling, don't you? When the world shifts and you cannot point to the exact moment it happened. It is like waking in a room and realizing the air smells different. Nothing dramatic, just a change in what you can tolerate. You pass a modest library reading room, light still glowing inside. A man stands near a display of reports, brow furrowed. The Lancet Analytical Commission circular sits on a stand. Results of food adulteration testing. Lists of butter, pickles, bread, tea, no names, just categories and compounds. The man mutters, half joking, trying to see if my vinegar made the list. Then he folds the paper carefully, almost tenderly, like it might cut him. Education is the weapon here. Not loud, not glamorous, just persistent. A leaflet passed from hand to hand, a lecture in a cold room, a mother showing her son how to sniff a sweet. As the rain continues, you turn toward home. Your coat grows damp, your hair clings to your forehead. The cold seeps in gently, a slow reminder that bodies are real, even when food is not. When you reach your room, you light a new candle. The flame flares, then steadies. The hearth still holds warmth. You sit down and place your hands near the fire, palms open, letting heat creep back into your fingers. On the table, your pamphlet lies folded. Beside it, the vinegar kit you bought, still tied with string. A small thing, a simple thing, yet it feels like a kind of power. You untie the string slowly, as if unwrapping a gift you do not fully trust. Inside are tiny vials and a little booklet of instructions. A teaspoon of flour, a drop of vinegar. Watch for fizz, smell the sweet, look at the tea leaves. Notice, notice. That is the command hidden in every line. You do not rush to test anything tonight. You simply sit with the kit beside you, because sometimes the comfort is not in action, but in knowing you can act if you need to. You pour yourself tea. Not very strong, not very dark. You sip and let the warmth spread through your chest. The taste is plain, earthy, no metallic ring on the tongue. You smile faintly. It is strange. You thought learning the truth would make everything bitter, but it has done something else. It has returned your senses to you. You eat a simple supper, bread that is heavier than fashion prefers, a little cheese, a slice of apple, nothing dazzling, nothing engineered to shine. And as you chew, slowly, you feel your body settle. You feel your breath deepen. You feel that old tension, the one you carried without naming it, loosen by a fraction. The candle burns. Outside, rain softens into a mist. The city's sounds fade into a low hum. This is the quiet ending the century rarely gets credit for. Not a law passed in triumph, not a villain punished. A person at a table, eating a meal that will not make them sick. That is what dignity tastes like. Not sweet, not bright, just steady. Breathe in and out. Let Parliament fade into shadow. Let the factory belts slow in your imagination. Let the market calls drift away until they are only distant music. Now the only sound is the fire. The only light is candle glow. The only task is to rest. And as you drift toward sleep, hold one gentle thought close. History was not always loud. Sometimes it moved in teaspoons, in crumbs, in quiet refusals, in someone saying softly, no more. Let that softness carry you. Let your eyelids grow heavy. Let the fog roll across your thoughts like a blanket. Sleep now. Tomorrow the city will still be imperfect, but it will be watched. And in being watched, it will begin slowly to change. Before you fully surrender to sleep, your mind wanders once more to the street below. A late cart passes, wheels whispering over wet stone. Somewhere a door opens, then closes, a soft thud like a book shut. A baby cries in a nearby room, then quiets, soothed by a murmured voice you cannot hear clearly. Life continuing, small and ordinary, even while history shifts under it. You think about the letters on the clerk's table, how each one was written by a hand that probably shook from cold. How ink was bought with money that could have bought bread. How courage sometimes looks like postage. And then you imagine a morning that is not yet here. A morning when a mother buys milk and it is simply milk. When a loaf is pale because wheat was good that year, not because powder was added. When sweets are bright because fruit and sugar can afford to be real. It may take years, it may take decades, but change does not need your impatience tonight. It only needs your rest. So loosen your shoulders, let your jaw unclench, let your tongue stop tasting for metal. Breathe in and out. The candle flame narrows, shadows soften. The city beyond the window becomes a blur of fog and distant light, and you drift slowly into the safest kind of darkness. The kind that asks nothing from you, the kind that holds you, the kind that lets you sleep. Good night.